This is the reason that I'm doing Birds Robe, is to have this feeling, this emotion that I get from my friends and my favourite band's music is like nothing else.
Birds Robe is family.
Cliche as it is, family for me.
Birds Robe feels like a support network that I didn't think existed.
A sense of family and a sense of being wrapped up.
Just feeling nurtured as well. Just knowing that we've got someone in our corner is just so nice. Yeah, we've really felt it and we've really appreciated it.
It's in the name. It's a Birds Robe collective. It's a group of like-minded musicians, artists, punters, enthusiasts. It's a family. It's a family where people support each other for many, many years.
Every one of these bands is connected beyond music. A lot of friendships have been formed, and I think that family nature exists. And I think that's because of the culture of the Birds Robe collective.
It's an experience. It's ineffable. It's greater than the sum of its parts.
Awesome! Birds Robe, incredible!
Birds Robe is a classic, slow burn, DIY record label run by a guy who really believes in the music that he's dealing with.
Birds Robe is a kind of random shooting star of the Australian music industry.
Birds Robe is a collective of like-minded, like-sounding, like-philosophy bands and musicians brought together by Mike Solo in the pursuit of creating intense, memorable experiences for music lovers around the world.
Kind of don't fit anywhere else in the Australian music scene, and Birds Robe gives it a home.
When I was 18 or 19, it was a bunch of cool rock shows that had bands that I liked the most in the Sydney scene.
It's, in my opinion, it's kind of like Australia's connection to the rest of the world with prog rock and post-rock and instrumental, experimental music.
I think Birds Robe kind of are the it label for this particular genre of music in this country. I think Mike has done so much for the scene and for bands like us who otherwise would have no real avenue.
The two words of opportunity and possibility, I would say.
And so for us, it represented, a chance to expand and a chance to share our art with, more people, which is important to us. If you work hard on this really niche kind of craft that can seem hopelessly unwanted sometimes, that you can go on to do things that, mean things to people, that, the music that we make and the other bands on the collective make do mean things to people locally as well as on a grassroots level overseas. And yeah, I found that to be really inspiring.
To me, it's always been that little community of guys and girls that just love the same sort of stuff, and we just get off on each other's music, and we just wanted to get it out there and book shows where we can all play together and deliver what we think is really great music to as many people as we can.
I think Birds Robe fundamentally is a community of like-minded musicians. I think it's a space for artistic freedom and creativity, which emerged out of a gap.
Birds Robe is a well-known Australian label. Mike from Birds Robe is a very nice guy, and he has his taste is a bit similar to what we are working with.
One man's passion for niche music and his dedication to this odd bunch of bands and people that exist in this little world that he is bringing out to the world with a very level head and in his own eccentric, quirky ways.
For what he's done, for bands and artists and the independent music scene and industry, prog rock scene, so to speak, has been fantastic. It's really, he's really been that artery to help things flow.
It's like a stamp of quality. If Bird Robe's involved, the music's going to be good. It's going to be like just a solid professional event.
A movement of people who are deeply passionate about music, doing music for the right reasons.
To me, Birds Robe is an amazing organisation filled with people who are very passionate about music
and about bringing great artists over and supporting local artists.
Birds Robe is a great... Birds Robe is Mike, as far as I'm concerned, and a record label, and also Mike is very involved in my experience with booking concerts as well. A very supportive man on the other side of the globe.
Nice people.
Yeah, I mean, Mike has a lot of passion about what he does, which I really appreciate. I feel like he wants everyone to have a really good experience, including the audience, including the artists, and he wants Australia to experience the show that the rest of the world gets to experience.
Birds Robe to me is Mike. So essentially, when I hear Birds Robe, I think of Mike Solo, the man, the myth, the legend.
A reflection of Mike Solo's personality, in that we need someone here to keep the spirit of experimental music, prog music, post-rock. We just need to keep it going here in Australia, because without him, I don't think there would be very much of a scene for this kind of stuff.
Birds Robe was a microphone company. That's how I got introduced to them. And then from there, they branched out into doing all kinds of tours and getting records in people's hands.
I guess they started as a collective, became a label, a good solid group of bands that I think represent Australia really well.
I think it's pretty clear that all the things that we've achieved and all the really cool shit that we've done wouldn't be possible without Birds Robe.
For us, Birds Robe is a place where being weird isn't weird.
You know, the world needs to wake up. You know, Mike Solo is like the best guy ever, and he needs to win some sort of lifetime achievement award or something. Yeah.
None of the success that people perceive Sleep Makes Waves as having would have ever occurred without Mike Solo. He is absolutely responsible, as much as any member of the band, for anything of meaning that we've achieved.
Birds Robe is a home for bands that didn't have one before. Hi, my name's Mike, and I'm from Birds Robe.
Alexander Tullett. I am now a teacher, still a musician, but I was one of the founding members of Robe Records, Robe Collective at the time.
Well, Birds Robe started because I was playing in a band called Super Florence Jam, and we had decided to play a form of music which we called prog, which was inspired by bands like King Crimson and Yes. And we felt like the best path to build an audience would be to find other like-minded artists and to put a scene together. At the time in Sydney where we were playing, there was an indie scene, there was a punk scene, a metal scene, a folk music scene. There wasn't anything really that we considered to be a prog scene.
It was really hard for us to find appropriate bills to be on with other bands that were, we weren't doing the bands any favors and they weren't doing us any favors. We were playing to audiences that were not ready for one half-an-hour-long rhythmic nightmare. And our fans didn't want to see whatever other band we were on a bill with. And it was getting really frustrating. It was like there was no point to playing live shows, basically. We weren't growing or getting, we weren't getting anything from it, except like $10 each or something at the end of the night.
The bassist in the band, Alex Tullett, introduced me to the Elephant Six Collective in North America, where a bunch of bands had gotten together to book shows together and share their audiences and build something that was greater than the sum of its parts. So we took that concept and tried to apply it to bands in Sydney, and we found a band called Captain Kickass and the Awesomes. We found other bands on MySpace like Pirate and through friends, we found the Space Banditos, and all of these bands shared something unique, which was a commitment to making interesting, what we thought was progressive sounding music. Odd time signatures, lots of instrumental sections, lots of unconventional instrumentation, and a general attitude that it was about pushing boundaries personally as musicians.
And so Mike and I started talking about putting some shows on together, and that's kind of where Birds Robe started. We talked about wanting to find like-minded bands who were not doing exactly the same thing as us, but like pushing different kinds of boundaries sonically or whatever. Well, the thing we found was that like there were bands out there that were experiencing exactly the same thing as us, and as we started meeting them, we would get put on bills where like, I think we got put on a bill with Captain Kickass and the Awesomes accidentally. And we were like, this is it. This is the guys. Like, this is the type of band we want to play with. And they were like, holy shit, we want to play with you guys too. Like, let's do this again.
We met Mike in the mid-2000s from an initiative that a venue called Candy's Apartments was putting on called the Show Up Showdown, where they invited 20 different bands from Sydney to come in and work together to sell out venues, pretty much. It was a marketing thing by the venue manager. It was pretty savvy. He printed tickets for every gig with every band's name on it and got us to go and try and pre-sell, because you'd make more money if you pre-sold. And there were some really cool bands in there, including Super Florence Jam, which was Mike's and Alex and Lawrence's and Adam's band, who we ultimately became good friends with. One of the venues in the city where we played one of these Show Up Showdown nights, we played kind of late. I think we were second or third on the bill. And then we had another gig up on the Northern Beaches at Mona Vale where we were playing midnight until 1. And Mike was there. Mike had seen us at the Civic and decided, I'm not going home, I'm going to drive to Mona Vale on the other side of Sydney, and I'm going to watch these guys again because I like them.
Yeah, that's right. That was awesome.
And he spoke to us later that night, and we're still tight friends to this day.
Is that even the first time that we actually met him and chatted to him? It might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think after the Mona Vale show.
And then we just played lots of gigs together, right? Like we were kind of on similar bills constantly.
Well, there was a real effort for Captain and Super Florence Jam to play shows together. And when we realised that there was another band in Sydney that was really interested in playing odd time signatures, playing strange, like progressive 8-9 minute epics really in a rock format, where previously when we're trying to break into the scene, we're paired with, soloist acoustic guitar players, singer-songwriters, where we didn't know the lay of the land. To find other bands like this was truly exciting. And then we started learning that there were other bands doing similar things. Space Project, Slimy Things, Pirate. Yeah, definitely. Mike, being the kind of person that he is, kept the connections going.
Yeah.
Drew strings from different musicians to different bands, and I really feel like from the pure excitement he felt with the music that was being made, created Birds Robe.
Yeah, we made a scene, because suddenly we weren't that weird anymore.
Monday morning, breakfast boring, until I discovered that toasty thing. Glowing on my kitchen bench it appeared. I don't know where it would appear. From outer space, another place. I can't seem to with this sarcastic taste. That interstellar galactic flavor. Where did it come from in the first place?
And then I quickly started the MySpace, that was as far as I'd thought about it. I was like, I will make a MySpace and I can make some funny animated GIFs that, and I did. I just went crazy, and I tricked out the whole page and put, the top 8 friends. I put Captain Kickass and Super Florence Jam, and I started getting really into that, you know, the presentation of it more than thinking about like what it would turn into.
So in the early days, we were playing shows with a range of weird and wonderful bands that, of course, didn't necessarily match, so to speak. And yeah, I think Mikey that came across our MySpace page or came along to a gig. And yeah, it was an email. It was reaching out to play a show, really supportive and generous with you know, his appreciation of the music. And yeah, well, it was a warm cold call. Yeah. Mike can't be cold.
No, not at all.
Mike's not cold.
Not at all.
Yeah, meeting Birds Robe was just through MySpace, I believe. Yeah, so I'd given out these CDs at the Mars Volta gig, trying to get our music out there a bit. Good old CDs, days of CDs. And yeah, I think we were trying to find a bass player, but Alex got in touch and was just saying, hey, we've got this Birds Robe thing going on. And we were just like, sure, great. You want to give us a gig? We're more than happy to. And yeah, it was awesome because straight away it was like, wow, we've kind of like found our people almost without, you know, we didn't have to go through the kind of like arduous process of playing at a pub gig with a bunch of bands that we totally alienated everyone. It was sort of like, don't you agree, right? It was like almost like our first gig, more or less, when we went like Excelsior and Hope and stuff. We were sort of playing with similar bands, and with Birds Robe, it was like, this is awesome.
We never once heard Get the Fuck Out of My Local, which was really good and really interesting that this scene that I wasn't aware existed. I mean, from my previous metal band experience and not in being involved in any sort of experimental anything, and then we just our first or second gig, and holy shit, there's all these amazing experimental, you know, non-pub like bands, as you put it, like, and they're all fantastic, and they're there, and it was like a very welcoming experience, I think.
And I think that, I'm not sure if I got the times right, but I'm pretty sure Birds Robe had just started around that time or a little bit before. So it definitely, as cliched as it sounds, it's sort of, there was this sense that there was this something new starting and that everyone was kind of on this sort of journey together. Oh, I used the word journey, didn't I?
Well, I thought you were going to say kind of cliche, didn't call it Evans Road, because like, I was there at the beginning, but yeah.
Yeah, I would like to take full credit, actually. So Evans Robe, it's called Evans Robe from now on.
We got booked for this gig on the recommendation of a drummer from a band that we knew called, they were called the Captain's Package. They ended up changing their name to the Captains because apparently the Captain's Package is offensive. Anyway, but he played in he played in multiple bands, and he basically put together, I think Mikey helped him put together a festival that featured a lot of his bands and then a lot of bands that he liked. And we were one of those bands. And so we got put onto this bill, played the show. It was great. I distinctly remember that show, and it was a very good night of music and very diverse. And that's the night that we met Mikey and Alex. And Mikey approached us and had a chat to us and was very happy to meet us because he heard about us and had checked the band out and he thought we were cool. And that same day, I also remember meeting another band that went on to be a Birds Robe, part of the collective Space Project, featuring a friend of mine, Adrian Barr, that we went on to have like quite a good friendship with. He ended up helping. He's an audio engineer as well, and he ended up engineering some sessions for us for one of our EPs, the Battle for Mount Analog 80s mixtape.
That's right. He recorded the percussion for us.
Like I said, a lot of other great bands played that day. But after that day, so for instance, that gig was cool because we got to present our band to an audience that was I feel was more appreciative to what we were trying to do. And so straight away, like from talking to Mikey, there was this excitement that I felt that we'd found, like, I guess someone that, you know, understood us, understood what we were doing, enjoyed what we were doing, and could help us be a part of something bigger. And like anyone though, I've had heaps of people approach me throughout the years with different projects that I've done, and I'm not a cynic, but you know, you're always kind of skeptical. It's like, who is this person? And one thing though that drew me to Mikey was that he also played in a band, and his band Super Florence Jam, we watched them many times back in the day. But
they played that night as well.
Yeah, so I think they played that night, and you know, they were great. They blew me away. They were a very, very good band. Mikey's a great drummer, and so there was an element of trust that went along, because I was like, all right, he's not just some dude going, I'm going to book some gigs and, you know, come and play these gigs with me and I'll make money off you or whatever. Then it was more like, no, we enjoy what you do, and he does his thing, and there's all these bands that are going to be part of it. And I thought, oh, okay, like this is something that would be potentially pretty cool to be a part of. And you know, fortunately, it was. It led on to many great things.
Because I'm inherently, I consider myself an introvert, and also have no real sense of fashion or presentation, certainly not when I was in my 20s. When Birds Robe was starting, Alex Tullett, you know, who was my best friend and also in my band and also co-founder of Birds Robe, was the guy that I would rely on to go talk to all the bands and get them invested in this idea of Birds Robe. Because he was cool, he knew all the bands that they were influenced by, they could speak the same language, they could swap notes about 65 Days of Static and of Montreal and the Elephant Six Collective and Boards of Canada and Telephone Tel Aviv and all these cool bands that I wasn't yet familiar with, or if I was familiar with them, it was through Alex. So, you know, if we were going out to a gig and we saw a band that looked kind of cool and I was feeling a bit shy, you know, he knew me so well, he would just, I'd say something like, oh, that band was awesome. Do you think they could fit on a bill with like Captain Kick-Ass and the Awesomes or Pirate or Sleep Makes Waves? And he'd say, yeah, definitely. They sound like this, this, and this. And then I'd look at him, and he'd look at me, and he'd say, you want me to go talk to them? I'd be, oh, yes, please, Alex, yeah, if you could. And, you know, he'd go away and talk to the band, and I'd see, this happened like a number of times, and I'd see from a distance the person from the band nodding, then starting to smile, and then, you know, they'd shake hands and Alex would come back and he'd be like, yeah, they're in. Because, you know, Alex has just sold them on this idea of a collective that wants to organize gigs for bands just like them. And every band that we met that had any kind of inkling of this sound was always struggling to find gigs in Sydney. So, yeah, it wasn't hard to get people interested in the idea. Some of them, like Sleep Makes Waves, we met at a band comp at Sydney Uni, and they were really intrigued by the idea, but I think, you know, a bit hesitant to get involved because they already kind of had some independent success. And I think, you know, Alex from Sleep Makes Waves was thinking, oh, sounds cool, like good luck. And eventually, as we started doing more Birds Robe shows, they then got in touch with us to get involved.
We played at Sleep Makes Waves, some of our very first gigs. We're at the University of Sydney band competition. And this was back in, I think, 2006, 2007. And I'm going to show you the exact poster by which we met all the Birds Robe guys, and it was this one. So the National Campus Band Comp, and honestly, it was a stacked lineup, had, on Tuesday, 24th of July, I believe 2007, Assemble the Empire, the Jezebels, who are obviously very successful, Killfeather, Plastic Asparagus and the Ape Men, Super Florence Jam, Sleep Makes Waves, and Middle C. So, us being lowly newbies, we play our set, Sleep Makes Waves. These two guys come up to us, Mike and Alex, and they're like, oh, that was really amazing. You know, just wanted to let you know, we're forming a collective. It's called Birds Robe. We're looking for like-minded musicians that play prog and post-rock kind of music. Would you be interested? And like, we had no idea what he was talking about. You know, from the Sleep Makes Waves perspective, we were very late on the scene. Like, we always looked up to bands like 1-2 Seppuku and like This Is Your Captain Speaking, and like the early days of post-rock in Australia. And we thought we were late. And to then have the opportunity to join this kind of new creation and grow organically together was exciting and appealing. And so that's what we started doing. And then from that point onwards, as you'll see through all these flyers, we just started having all our first gigs with Birds Robe bands, and it was incredible.
right from the start, the thing that was most compelling about putting the shows on and getting the bands together was the crowd that would turn up, because it was full of people who were just completely psyched to be there for every single one of those bands. They'd come for the band that they were coming to see. Sometimes it was friends of the band, sometimes it was their fans. But they would see all of those bands on that bill, and they would love them. They would stay there for the whole show. They'd clap after every song. They wouldn't, just dip after the band that they came to see. And it was, that was really rare, especially considering like the types of bills that Super Florence Jam were part of. Sydney music was so weird. Sydney live music, I mean, it still kind of is. The bills that we would get put on, because they didn't make sense, it was just a bill for the sake of a bill. It would just be your friends or fans watching you, and then they'd all leave. And then the next band's friends and fans would come and watch them, and then they'd all leave. There was none of that, there was no camaraderie, there was no cohesion. But the Birds Robe shows felt super different.
We started going to Birds Robe gigs, right? So beforehand, we'd known Mike through like the Sydney Uni Band Comp or something, and that was our first interactions with Mike. But then when he started putting on shows with Birds Robe, Alex and I and Tom would go along to a few of these gigs, and we were impressed with like all the acts he was putting on. The rooms weren't full by any means. There were only a few punters there, but those punters were, I'm pretty sure we were all looking around the room going, we're watching like some amazing bands here, like some really talented individuals who are in our backyard.
I can't remember when Birds Robe actually officially started, but we started playing as Dumb Saint in 2009, and I'm pretty sure it was before the end of that year, or maybe the next year, that we played our first Birds Robe show. I think it was called Menagerie.
Yeah.
It was at Herman's Bar at Sydney Uni, and I think it was a one-off show that was, or maybe it was like a weekend-long festival or something. I can't really remember, but it was, I think the only time they did that Menagerie like event. But it was sort of a showcase of Birds Robe bands, and that was the first time we played a Birds Robe show.
One of the first Birds Robe like showcases, if you like, that I saw was something called Featherfest, and I think that was immediately after I'd been to like a festival where some of the Birds Robe bands had played, but it was not organised by Mike. It was called High and Dry Festival in 2009. And then I think it was like a month later that Mike and Alex had put on Featherfest, and that was at the Annandale. And I think it was a 2-room setup, like the main stage and then that little sidebar that they had. And I remember seeing like Pirate there, and Captain Kickass, I think, as well played, but Crooked Field Band played. I think Meniscus played as well. Yeah, so it was, any time there was like that kind of vibe was always going to be where there was, it wasn't just like your standard, here's a main act and a support act, but it was like a more of a party, It was always a really good time, and we had the fortune of being included in a couple of those kind of shows.
I first became aware of Birds Robe because I was living with a friend called Phil, who was in a band called Captain Kickass and the Awesomes. When we were living together, we had a lot in common. It was actually quite scary. We were both long-haired prog musicians that actually shared the same birthday. Pretty mental. And our band started playing with his band, Captain Kickass and the Awesomes, and we just got along like a house on fire. There was no competitiveness between the bands. It was just so much fun. And they really took us with them, and they introduced me to Mike, and that's where the friendship started. I thought that we were too heavy to be on Birds Robe. But they proved me completely wrong and made me feel extremely comfortable.
I think it was around 2010 they formed, around that time. And we saw it through MySpace, had a page, it was on the Ozprog forums. And associated myself with like, oh, Birds Robe, that's something that we need to get on. But realised as a band that we had to do a bet to get to that point. And by chance, we had a show at the Excelsior Hotel in Surrey Hills. And a gentleman by the name of Alex Tullett was at that show, and unknowing to us at the time, saw us, liked us, and said, "Hey, I'm Alex Tullett from Birds Robe. You should do a show together at some point." And we were a bit giddy at that moment. We're like, "Oh my God, that's something we've been trying to do." So that was the first time we became aware. And the first time we did a show with Birds Robe was Featherfest at Excelsior Hotel. And I remember the subject line. It was an email sent to me. I was at uni. And it was the day before the festival. I think a band pulled out. I can't remember who it was. And the subject line was, "I know it's late notice, but ... Open the email. Can you play Featherfest tomorrow at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon?" We're like, "Yeah, of course." And then, within 12 hours, we're at the show.
I'm pretty sure Tullett was, when we had the first conversation as a band, I guess when Birds Robe first said, "Oh, you guys were pretty good. We'd like you to play a show." I'm pretty sure I was talking to Tullett at the time, and I thought our Christmases had all come at once. So yeah, I've vivid memories of that, and respect for him at the time as well as Mike. Starting this whole thing. I remember that moment. So
yeah, Tullett discovered us, if that makes sense, and became Mike aware of who we are. And little funny thing, I actually thought Alex Tullett, the person, was named Mike Solo, and then Alex Tullett was, the other way around, whatever. Yeah, it was just, so when we met him, I thought that was Mike, but it was actually Alex Tullett, and then, Mike was Alex Tullett. Yeah, it was crazy, but, cool dude, and, he's done some fantastic things with his own music since.
We were very surprised and fortunate that a bunch of people started coming to those shows, and through that we were introduced to more artists, and gradually we're able to book more and more shows with varied lineups, and build what started to feel like a community and a family of musicians in Sydney.
And the bands were so appreciative too, that it was like, well, we can't stop now. Like, we've just got this going. So it's, it felt really natural to keep it going right from the start.
We started out the band with Crooked Fiddle. One of the ways we sort of tried to build a scene or start something up was to put on a monthly gig where we did 5 bands for $5 in Glebe in Sydney, and one of the fans of our band came up and told us excitedly about this amazing band that she loved called Super Florence Jam, which I then went to see, I think, at Spectrum in Sydney. And the drummer was going completely off, and that turned out to be Mike from Birds Robe, who had just started putting on these sort of Birds Robe collective gigs where there's generally a slightly sort of rocky, proggy, post-rock thing going on between the bands, but I think one of the things I like the most is that there wasn't a specific genre, and all the bands felt like they could have fit in a number of camps, and that felt like it was down our alley as a band even long before we got involved with Birds Robe ourselves.
I think I became aware of Birds Robe attending a few shows, probably in my early 20s. So it was kind of in the heavy metal scene at the time, and I was enjoying that. I connected with that music. But I went along to a friend's concert who performed in Squat Club, and that was part of a kind of Birds Robe showcase. And I remember just being absolutely blown away by the acts there. I mean, it was such a diverse range of artists, a lot of different styles, but somehow there were some kind of, I guess, kind of core themes that brought all the artists together. I was impressed by the crowd. It was a really open, friendly crowd. And I was just energized and excited to see so many different styles under the one roof, and started to give me a few ideas about what I might want to do in future.
Yeah, but Birds Robe definitely picked up on some undercurrents that hadn't sort of merged themselves yet. So it was interesting, like how separate some of them would be. As you said, like Crooked Fiddle would refer to themselves as gypsy deathcore, and Barons of Tang were probably something similar as well. And they were Melbourne. And
Chainsaw Folk.
Chainsaw Folk, yeah, that's right. But then you had, for some reason, the way that Birds Robe would start to put things together was that And I mean, some of it's location specific and just being a little bit left of center music. So suddenly Barons of Tang and Mushroom Giant made sense to be playing together. But it was through these kind of links. And I guess, I don't know, if you're open to weird shit, you're open to a wide variety of weird shit. So then suddenly there's gigs where, I mean, as I said, we weren't that strange. There was far stranger. I mean, we played a gig with Toy Death.
We want to get a lot better, a lot faster.
It's pretty fucking weird, isn't it?
Toy Death, Ricketitas.
Oh, Ricketitas, yeah, that's great. And so, and then all into the really like metal end of that too, like Sirius Beak. Oh, was another one there. Oh, and even, did we play with Darth Vegas? Or we played around a Darth Vegas kind of vibe?
Yeah, played with Darth Vegas. Again, like, just very left of center, almost like very Mr. Bungle influence.
Yeah, totally, totally.
I can remember going to a Birds Robe show, or my first couple of Birds Robe shows, I was extremely impressed by the level of talent. I'd been getting into the styles of music the label produces on an international level, and then to go to these concerts just around small pubs in Sydney with 30, 40 other people and see talent that I think was absolutely world class was just very inspirational for me, really foundational in my involvement with the music scene.
It really gave the musicians who would go to gigs something to tap into. I feel like Birds Robe music speaks to people who are musicians, and I would say that at least half of our audience at any given show were musicians who could relate and emote and participate with the music because of how pumped they were on seeing people play music like this, play their instruments like that.
In the years of Birds Robe, there was almost like an arms race for progressive music going on. There are a bunch of bands like Squat Club and Pirate and Captain Kickass. You know, I was playing in Sirius Beak. And we were all trying our best to create quite complex, angular, progressive music. And so we would watch one another perform or release new albums, and then we'd get inspired and want to try and top that or take an influence from that, or at least reference what was going on in some way. So there was a lot of kind of bouncing off the creativity of different musicians in the scene.
I guess that's the first time, at least for me, that like we're doing gigs and you get into that real like music nerd personnel. You sort of go like, yeah, but the thing is, right, she used to play bass in this band, and then she went to this thing with this guy, and then this guy was in this band, and he's the engineer on that record. It was all that kind of stuff that had never, and like that's what you talk about with real bands, right? That's the kind of stuff where you sort of go, oh yeah, but the thing is, because like it's actually Dave Navarro and this dude playing in this band, and Frusciante and Flea are on the Deloused, and you know they're in Alanis Morissette's record as well. That's weird, isn't it? All that kind of shit. But it was funny to go like, oh, we're actually in the middle of a really local, smaller kind of version of that. It was cool. So then suddenly there was all this music nerdom, and so I mean, you made friends out of it as well. But it was just this cool kind of thing that there was this inbred genealogy of all these bands that would suddenly go like, yeah, you remember that gig in 2002 where Old Mate Bit the Glass? They were supporting that kind of thing. It was good. It was fun. I'd never really had that before.
Yeah.
I remember Pirate, particularly one gig, was just amazing at one particular gig.
It definitely floored us. It was like one of those bands that, you know, pretty rare, where you actually like going, what?
The jam
What
aspect,
are they doing? What is that?
The energy, the musicianship, like they were just, phenomenal.
Being at Herman's Bar on the 8th of January in 2009 and being like, this is the first time that Captain Kickass and the Awesomes are going to watch Pirate play, and it's the first time that Pirate are going to see Squat Club play. And I'm watching Alex from Captain Kickass watch Pirate soundcheck. And Alex is doing his little tap thing. Pirate are just doing the line check, and I'm like, come on guys, play some music before Alex walks out that door to get dinner. And then they literally play like 12 seconds of a song, and then the sound guy's like, oh sorry, it's peaking, just hold up. But Alex has already heard enough, and he's gone from like being in the zone to like, yeah, all right. And I go over to him and I'm like, hey Alex, tell me what you want to eat. I'll go get you something. You have to stay and make sure you see, because they were opening or something. And then, you know, Tim from Pirate and those guys were like very friendly, but always very like reserved. But again, I'm like, hey guys, like everyone would always stay and watch everyone else, but Herman's Bar was a bit out of the way, so maybe people would come late after eating dinner or whatever. And I'd be like, just make sure you watch the Squat Club set. And Tim's like, oh mate, we're not going anywhere. Like, this night's been amazing. And then, you know, get the email on Monday, like, oh Mike, that was like the best lineup we've ever played on. What a shame it's Squat Club's last show. That was so good. And so then obviously when Squat Club come back a year later to relaunch their album and play at the Bald Faced Stag, which is now called Crowbar, of course, on the lineup, you got to have Pirate and Captain Kickass and the Awesomes and, you know, everyone together again, and it's epic.
Creatively, it felt like home. It was, cliche as that might sound, but in terms of the breadth of bands, that there were bands that were really exciting to listen to. They were doing things we hadn't heard before. They were, you know, trying new things. It was very, it felt new but familiar.
Once we had that success and the initial positive reaction, we then also realized that a bunch of people that had attended that show were also in bands, and they started to get in touch with us, or we found them through MySpace, which was the fashion at the time, and we found we were able to start booking more shows off the strength of that. We were able to book at Herman's Bar, the Annandale Hotel, invite more and more artists with this track record of having 1 or 2 shows that had a couple of hundred people. And we graduated from Thursday nights at the Annandale Hotel with 150 people to getting a Saturday night at the Annandale Hotel with a couple of hundred people, being able to do, you know, roughly a show a month with a varied lineup. And it wasn't always Super Florence Jam and Captain Kickass. By now we were rotating bands like Pirate and Squat Club and other amazing acts that we were discovering. So we felt we were off and running.
When we first came across Birds Robe, it was Birds Robe Collective rather than, I think that was before the record, Birds Robe Records started officially. And I think the word collective sums it up because it was just a collection of different people, not just musicians and bands, but audience members, some of who were in other bands associated, some who were totally unrelated to any of the bands, but just kind of a collective of quite different people that would go and see Birds Robe gigs because they knew there would be good music and good people. And so, yeah, that's how it sort of started out for me, and a way of getting introduced into new music that you wouldn't necessarily come across yourself, especially before, I guess it was before Spotify and things like that. Streaming services really...
It's a curation service.
Yeah, it was like, oh, you want to go and see a gig this weekend? What's Bird Robe putting on? I've never heard of this band, but I'm sure they're great. Check them out.
Let's go see Squat Club and Captain Kickass and the Awesomes at the Crowbar.
No, it wasn't Crowbar.
It wasn't Crowbar back then, was it?
Bald-faced Stag, yeah. Come on, Joe. This is the timelines are crossing. Don't cross the timelines, you'll vanish.
Yeah, I just remember it being easy, basically, as in like, which probably says more about like me taking situations for granted and not understanding there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff of the gigs, which I was like.
It also says something to their accommodating nature, because as you can tell from talking to us, it's fucking hard sometimes. So, but for them, yeah, I just remember them being insanely helpful and never being fazed by anything. Or ever be, you know, and their things weren't, you know, challenging, I suppose. They were just, yeah, sure, you need help with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Like really easygoing people who work with both of them.
Yeah, even though we were working with them it was a short time.
It was
around, but like, it was always easy, wasn't it?
What I really wanted to get out of creating Birds Robe shows was a curated experience, and it was effectively what I, as a fan, would want to see if I was going to a show. So we thought very carefully about venues that were in good locations and had good production that we actually enjoyed going to. We thought very carefully about the lineups. As a musician, having enough changeover time between the artists so that you can actually start your set on time and play your full set of music, allowing artists to play for at least 30, 40, 45 minutes so that they could play more than one song, because we're talking about prog and post-rock music. Nothing's under 5 minutes, let's be real. And you know, setting a ticket price that's reasonable, giving everyone all the information about the show earlier than the day before the show, all that kind of stuff. And you know, creating a poster and describing it in an interesting way, a night of progressive and experimental music, or whatever it was, someone's album launch or something like that. You know, for fans of Pink Floyd, the Mars Volta and Frank Zappa, or Explosions in the Sky, or whatever, just whatever reference points we could provide to people to make it sound interesting, and then get all of the individual bands motivated and engaged with promoting their show, to say, look, the point of doing this show is so that all of us get to play more shows in front of a receptive audience that's into your kind of music. And we've all been in the same boat. We're all struggling to get gigs to play in front of the right audience. People would play, or their friends would leave, and then some other artist that plays a different kind of music would play, and then all their friends would leave. So selling the idea of it to the artists in advance was important, and getting them to promote it, but then also strategically trying to explain to bands, look, at the moment we're all basically playing for our friends and a few, you know, true fans that we're not friendly with already. And if we play every single week in Sydney, it's just too much. Like, no one is going to go to your gig every single week in a row. And I would use analogies like, hey, are you guys a fan of Tool or Pink Floyd or something? And they'd be like, oh yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So how many shows, you know, they did 3 shows in Sydney on their last tour. Did you go to all 3 shows? No, I just went to 1. And I'm like, okay, what if they were playing every week in Sydney for $15 at, you know, the Annandale Hotel? Oh, wow, I'd go to like 5 or 10 shows. And I'm like, cool. Would you go to 50 shows every week of the year? Probably not. I have other stuff I need to do, you know? And I'm like, cool. So if you play every single week of the year in Sydney, not everyone's going to come to every show. If you want to play to more people and have a really good atmosphere, maybe once a month. So if we're doing this big event at the Annandale Hotel or the Excelsior Hotel, you know, let's just make sure that we keep our schedules clear for at least 2 to 4 weeks either side, so that everyone's coming to this gig and it's going to be epic and so much fun. And so, you know, it didn't work every single time, but once we had a few gigs that were like that, everyone saw the value of being more strategic around their scheduling, and we'd have proper conversations about, hey, we haven't played in a few months, Mike. What's coming up with Birds Robe? Can we jump on a lineup? Yeah, I've got something in October. Do you think you can wait till then? Yeah, we'll wait a couple months. No worries. We'll make it a big thing. Or, oh, hey, yeah, just letting you know we're playing in September. So, you know, maybe let's not clash on the same night. Okay, cool. And, you know, I'd have penciled them in for something in October. I'm like, cool, maybe you do the November show instead, just to space it out. And I'd also have, you know, this wish list of bands that I wanted to meet each other, and I wanted, you know, Space Project to play with Sleep Makes Waves, and I wanted Sulkiri and Panzer Queen to play with Meniscus, and all these different pairings and combinations. So once the bands met each other and enjoyed each other's music, again, they'd be more invested, because that was part of it. Bands would go to gigs and not really enjoy what else was going on in Sydney. But Alex Tullett and I had done all this research on MySpace and been to shows and found that there were really interesting things happening. They just weren't together in an organised fashion.
It started as a platform for Super Florence Jam that eventually became something totally different, as Super Florence Jam itself also went in a kind of an overlapping but a different direction.
Super Florence Jam were planning to record a series of concept EPs. We were just going to do it cheaply. Huge 20-minute plus jam epics, classically inspired boleros, all this kind of stuff. And we'd hired some cheap studio time at the Brain Studios with Clayton Segalov. And he heard us rehearsing all of this nonsense. I enjoyed it at the time. And he said, I think you guys actually could write some short songs and be quite successful as a regular rock band. I'd like to produce you.
The origin story of my involvement with Birds Robe would be when Mike Solo hit me up to record his band, the Super Florence Jam, way back in the day. And we had a bit of fun making some tunes.
To cut to the chase, we thought that was a very interesting prospect and we felt his intention was very genuine. So we went down the path of recording an EP with him with what we felt to be our best songs, you know, up to a maximum of 6 minutes. And we went back to being a rock band again. And this is around the same time that Birds Robe now is quite busy. I've been booking a lot of shows with a lot of bands, and it's all culminating in an event called Progfest, co-presented with Tim from Welcome Entertainment, Craig from Mushroom Giant from Melbourne, inspired by the interactions and support of people at the ozprog.com forum, which I was a member of at the time. And all these progressive-minded bands from all over the country are going to convene. There's 11th He Reaches London from Perth, Nabel of Ascaris from Melbourne, Sleep Makes Waves from Sydney, and then a bunch of my local favourites, Slimy Things, Pirate, Captain Kick-Ass and the Awesomes, Mish, all these great bands. And at this time, I had a bit of a conundrum facing me. All these great bands are playing Progfest, and there's a lot of exciting things happening for Birds Robe. But at the same time, my band is now no longer going to be making proggy sounding music. So I was wondering what my motivation to continue with Birds Robe was going to be. And as I was contemplating this, I went to go and see a band called Space Project at the Manning Bar in Sydney, and they started playing one of my favourite songs, Horizon. And I felt, you know, the goosebumps coming up on my arm and the hair on the back of my neck standing up. And I realised in that moment, this is the reason that I'm doing Birds Robe, is to have this feeling, this emotion that I get from my friends and my favourite band's music is like nothing else. And, you know, I'd felt strongly that way about other bands. The first time I saw Captain Kick-Ass and the Awesomes, the first time I saw Pirate, I was really excited to share their music with people. But, you know, I'd always had this self-interest with my own band to try and promote my band within that scene that we were building. Now I didn't have that anymore. I discovered a new purpose, which was to share this music that obviously I could still get to enjoy, but also I felt a drive to try and share it with other people.
You know, with a lot of creative projects, you sort of have to trick yourself at the start into keeping on going with a regular schedule in order to get good enough that the momentum just carries you. I don't remember that ever feeling like that in the early days of Birds Robe. It was always just like, oh no, this is good. This feels good. We're playing good bills with good bands. They're having a good time. Their fans are having a good time. The venues are usually pretty happy. Like, it just felt good.
The thing that I remember the most, I distinctly remember that Baldface Stag gig where it was just like a stacked lineup of 5 amazing bands and just being so excited. And then it was definitely Captain Kick-Ass on the bill, definitely Squat Club. I can't remember all the names of all the other bands on the bill, but it was a Birds Robe gig. And at the end of the night, I just thought, this is amazing. And then Gordon and I went to Soundwave the next day and were thoroughly disappointed with all these international touring bands.
Yeah, it was such a downer compared.
Birds Robe the night before was so much more where it was at musically. And that was definitely not my first experience with Birds Robe, but it was definitely when I felt like that was a scene that was worth being part of and paying attention to.
every time I was looking for really cool bands for us to play with, I would check out who the contact was, and the contact was always Mike Solo at Bird's Robe.
And it wasn't for, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 years of putting shows on before the idea of being a label had ever been a conversation. I think we probably both thought about it, like maybe at some point. But it was a while before the ambition like took hold, I think.
Thank you so much for bringing 65 Days of Static to Australia. When are you going to bring This Will Destroy You to Australia? And so I thought, well, I guess better reach out to This Will Destroy You.
Who are you guys? Are you guys like the Pulse? And Tim Charles was like, yeah, that's exactly right, Andy. We're the Pulse.
Once that kind of started to go around Sydney, then it became a matter of trying to spread that to other cities. You could have a band like Asleep Makes Waves release an album and then try and go on a national tour of Australia. And that was the next step.